They counted the days, not out loud, not in a way they would ever admit, but quietly, in the way they glance at the door a little longer than necessary, in the way they mention your name in conversations you were not part of, in the way they made sure the guest towels were fresh even when no visit was planned. They were hoping. And when you finally walked through that door, something happened inside them that was far more complicated, far more layered, and far more beautiful than simple happiness. Picture the moment exactly. You arrive, maybe a little rushed, maybe carrying bags, maybe checking your phone one last time before pocketing it. They open the door, and their face does something you almost cannot describe. It is not just a smile. It is a reorganization of their entire expression, like a room that has been waiting in dim light and someone finally turned the lamp on. They say something light, something easy, something like, "You look thin," or come in, I made food." They do not say what is actually moving through them. They never do. But here is what is actually happening beneath that surface, and it matters more than most people realize. When elderly people experience a long-awaited reunion with someone they love, the brain does not simply register pleasure. It releases a cascade of neurochemicals, most significantly oxytocin, the same bonding compound that fires during moments of deep human connection. For someone who has spent weeks or months in a quieter, more solitary rhythm, this flood is not subtle. It is physiologically overwhelming in the most tender sense of that word. Their nervous system, which has been operating in a lower register, suddenly receives a signal that says, "You are not forgotten. You are still someone's person. The world still contains you." That signal is not small. That signal is everything. What makes this even more layered is something psychologists call emotional suppression in later life. As people age, many of them become extraordinarily skilled at managing how much of their inner world they reveal, particularly to the people they love most. This is not dishonesty. It is protection of you from feeling guilty, protection of themselves from appearing to need too much, protection of the relationship from the weight of all that unspoken longing. So they make the food, they fuss about the towels, they ask about your job or your car or whether you have been sleeping enough. They fill the air with the ordinary because the extraordinary, what they actually feel, is almost too large to say out loud. Research into aging and emotional processing consistently shows that social visits are among the most significant predictors of psychological well-being in older adults, more than medication in certain contexts, more than physical health interventions in others. Not weekly phone calls, not messages, not the promise of a future visit. Presence. Actual, physical, "you are in this room with me" presence. The longing for that is not weakness. It is one of the most documented, most human responses to growing older in a world that gradually becomes quieter around you. And now consider what they are actually feeling when you sit down across from them at that kitchen table. When you eat the food they started preparing the moment they knew you were coming. When you half listen while they tell a story you have heard before. What they wish you understood is that the story is not the point. The story is just a vehicle. What they are really doing is making sure they still exist to you, that their history is not only stored in their own fading memory, but also in yours. When you listen, even imperfectly, even while glancing at your phone, you are giving them something irreplaceable. You are saying, "Your life happened. It mattered." And someone who is still young enough to carry it forward is sitting here receiving it. What they wish you knew is that the emotion they felt when you arrived, that tight-chested, eye-brightening, carefully managed wave of feeling, was not just happiness. It was relief. Relief that you came before they had to wonder if you would. Relief that the distance between your lives had not grown too permanent. Relief that love is still a living thing between you and not something settling quietly into obligation. They would never say any of this. They will offer you more food instead. But it is all there, just beneath the small talk, just behind the eyes that keep finding you across the room even when you are not speaking. There is also something that happens toward the end of a visit that deserves its own attention, because it is one of the most psychologically significant and least discussed moments in these reunions. As you start gathering your things, as the visit moves toward its close, a subtle shift occurs in them. They slow down. They find one more thing to show you, one more story, one more cup of something. They are not being difficult. They are trying to stretch the window of your presence, because what comes after you leave is not simply quietness. It is a return to a world that moves without them at its center, and the contrast between the fullness of your visit and the ordinary silence that follows is, for many elderly people, genuinely hard to metabolize. Studies in gerontological psychology have found that the period following a meaningful social visit can sometimes temporarily heighten feelings of loneliness rather than reduce them, precisely because the visit illuminates what is usually absent. They know this, in their body, if not in their language. That is why they linger. That is why the goodbye takes 3 times longer than it should. What they wish you knew, most of all, is that they are not trying to hold you. They know you have a life. They are proud of that life, fiercely, quietly proud in a way they probably do not say often enough. But they want you to understand that visiting them is not a small thing. It is not an errand of kindness or a box to tick. It is one of the few remaining experiences that reminds them that their existence still radiates outward, that they are not only who they were, but still who they are to someone who walks through the door and sits down and stays, even for just an afternoon. So here is what you can do, and it does not require grand gestures or rearranged lives. The first thing is this. The next time you visit, tell them something specific that you remember. Not a general, "I think about you." Something exact. The way they made a particular thing, something funny they once said, a moment from years ago that stayed with you. When you give them a specific memory, you give them evidence that they have mattered in a detailed way, not just in a general loving way, and that distinction reaches somewhere in them that a simple "I love you" sometimes cannot. The second thing is smaller still. Before you leave, tell them the next time you will come back, and mean it. Not soon, a real answer. Because what happens in the days after your visit is that they hold on to that date like a small lantern. It does not erase the quiet, but it lights it, just enough. They will not tell you any of this. They will say it was so good to see you, that you should eat more, that the drive home is long, so be careful. They will stand at the door longer than you probably notice. They will watch until you are out of sight. Understanding the people who raised us, or who raised the people who raised us, is not something we do because it is required of us. We do it because when we finally see what is actually happening behind their careful composure, we realize that what looks like routine is love, and what looks like repetition is memory trying to stay alive, and what looks like a simple visit is one of the most meaningful things we will ever give.